We're live and back to finish the 12 Rules of Life by Jordan Peterson. So today we talk about rule number 12.
And may I say, it's been a journey.
Oh yeah. it's been heavy uh and we'll talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Rule number 12 is pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street or a dog, he says. So yeah, tell us. It's been heavy, right? I mean, these
Oh,
12 rules.
well, look, um, for good or for bad, I'm a very, very practical individual.
Yeah.
Okay. So I try to look at the practicality in things, resolve them. If there's an issue, get it resolved, this and that, and whatever. So maybe my mind is not that good at metaphors. So when I read something like pet a cat when you encounter one on the street, I mean, what on earth is he talking about?
Yeah.
And so, what helps me with all these rules that he has, because my hat's off to the man, tremendous research, fantastic mind, of today. And of course, there's a lot to be learned from this gentleman. He's very cultured and learned, and he's read, and okay. But what helped me was to try to figure out what the chapters were before, when I got started. In other words, that old saying, take the end and start with the end in mind. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the
Yeah.
books that we should go over. One of the traits of highly successful people is start
Start
with
with the
the
end in
end in
mind.
mind.
Yeah.
And so, with that, this chapter is about the meditation of fragility, how fragile life is, we are,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of helped me navigate through the chapter, because he's all over the place. He's not all over the place, he ties it down, but I just can't.
It's a little difficult to follow, and that's why coming together to talk about the rule and hear your what you got out of it, because you get something different out of it than I do.
For sure.
What I got out of this rule is to just summarize it, and then we can go into it. Is um the reason he's saying pet a cat when you encounter one on the street is that try to enjoy the little things in life that sometimes it's hard to, if you're going through a difficult moment, but life gives you this little opportunity like a cat coming up to you that can maybe make your day for that quick moment a little bit better.
Okay.
And even though he makes it clear in all of the chapters that life is suffering,
Yeah.
there are things within that suffering, little glimpses of light. And one of them could be like, petting a cat or a dog. It makes you happy because it makes you for a moment even forget about everything you have going on, because that all your attention is on that cat, that dog, or something else in life. He even brought up towards the end of the chapter, it could be just you got a great cup of coffee at the cafe, and you're enjoying that cup of coffee. So you're just the little things that maybe make life a little easier if you're going through something very difficult or
Hmm.
a life of suffering.
Okay.
That's kind of what I got out of that, you
Okay.
know.
Well, he says, and he pulls no punches, that life is suffering. So if at the moment you're living a good life, count your lucky stars,
Right.
because things are coming down the pike. And he's talking about the fragility of life as we get older. You're very young compared to me. I'm a lot older compared to you. So, there are certain things, even though I'm very active, that I cannot do now that I used to do, even recovery time on muscles and running and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, meditating on the fragility of life. And he says, this is what I got out of it. He says, what do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do when you don't know what to do? Like, for example, you have a complete collapse of a dream, okay? Or you have a death in the family. How do you cope with life when it turns your world upside down because of a tragedy?
Yeah.
And one of the things, and then I'll let you take over, but one of the things that I found quite interesting is he says, narrow your time frame when you're looking at the world and you're going through a very difficult thing. So he's saying, narrow down your time frame, maybe to minutes, or maybe to an hour,
Yeah.
or to a day, or
What does
to a
that mean, narrow
year.
your time frame? He's talking about focus on like a goal for the next hour, right? For the day, instead of thinking long-term goals. Is that what you're referring to?
So, folks, my interpretation of this is, if you're going through a very, very difficult time, like a collapse of a dream or a death in the family, something horrible that you're dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
he says that what may help everybody is to narrow down the time frame to minutes. Whatever amount of time that you can perceivably feel that,
Don't
uh,
plan too far ahead.
don't plan too far ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, he makes it clear.
Yeah, because you're
Just
suffering so much in the moment that you have no choice but to narrow that down if you can,
yeah,
and then try to move on somehow.
get through the day.
Get through it.
Yeah.
Get through that minute, get through that 10 minutes, get through that hour.
Yeah.
And I think the metaphor, that's why he explains all the things that his daughter Michaela was going through.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
a
she had some
tremendous
sort of
suffering.
rare juvenile rheumatoid
Yeah,
arthritis.
it's called idiopathic juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
And so she was a kid and it was
In pain.
debilitating. Yeah, and in pain. And so yeah, he went through some of the things that she was going through at that age, and
Yeah,
you know,
the bone connections, the structures,
the
everything.
pain
Oh,
medications and all that.
and then you have to deal with the possibility of these pain medications. Many of them, as the threshold of pain increases, the medications get stronger and they
Right.
produce habit forming
Sure. Sure.
characteristics. So,
Yeah.
he's gone through a lot with
Yeah.
his daughter. And she has gone through a lot.
Yeah, so he brought up that question that I think we've all asked, which is, why would God allow this kind of suffering to an innocent child?
Right.
That's the question that,
Why?
if God exists, why would he allow this to happen? To be honest with you, I didn't fully understand, and I went through the chapter more than once because I didn't fully understand what his answer to that was, because the way Peterson answers this is in stories.
Okay, so
So I didn't really fully understand, but the way that I got it is that in order he used the story of Superman, that Superman initially had certain powers. uh, I don't know if it was laser beams, eyes, and or whatever, and he could fly and he was very strong. But then the comic book kept making him stronger and stronger and stronger to the point where he had no more weaknesses. He had no limitations. It no longer became a story that anyone was interested in, because people are interested in a story of someone having limitations and overcoming them. So the way that I took it was Peterson was saying that the reason these things happen is because God gave us the gift, let's say, of limitations and of illnesses and of things that we encounter. And then we have to go through these things and try to still be a good person and a better person out of it. But if he gave us no limitations, then there would be no story of humankind. That and this is a quote from the book, and it's kind of a hard concept for me to understand, but
okay.
basically he says that I wrote it down right here. It's people can survive through much pain and loss, but to persevere, they must see the good in being. So basically, you can never lose hope. And without limitation, there is no being. That's the quote. That's what I was looking for. The person that basically has everything, that can do everything, that has no limitation, and therefore there's no story. And so that's what he was getting to, to answer the question of why does God allow innocent children to go through something so tragic or suffering, is that without having these limitations, there is no being, there is no us. It's a little bit hard for me to grasp that, to be honest.
Well, same here.
I don't understand
Oh,
it fully.
I mean, I went back and read it twice, and
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, some of the other laws are a little bit more easier
the
to,
rules.
excuse me, the rules, you know? Um, yeah, he's talking about the suffering and the limitations of being,
Right.
okay? Like, for example, he compares it, so he's going through all this darkness or difficult time with his daughter, Michaela. And then he's still a clinical psychologist. So he was talking to a lady that her husband was going through cancer. And apparently he was feeling good about the battle that he was putting up. But then when he was in recovery from chemo, he gets the bad news that, oh, you know what? It
It's back.
metastasized. And so he says, wow, what a horrible or terrifying news to get while you are in recovery and somewhat in good spirits, thinking, this is going to work out. But the doctor comes out and tells you, look, it did metastasize. So, the fragility of being alive, of living, and he goes deep into this, and um, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that's interesting is that, as I'm reading this, there are a lot of things that are beyond our control.
Right.
You can't control some of these things. And then, I worry, okay, about the grandkids and so forth. But there are things that are beyond your control that you just have to say, you know what, I have to put it in a higher authority.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God,
Do the best with the
uh,
things you can control.
correct.
And
Otherwise, you're going to worry yourself into the ground.
right. And that's not good either.
No.
And Peterson said in this chapter to control, put the things in order that you can control. That's one of the things that we can do.
Yeah. There's this famous guy that's, his name is Facundo Cabral.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a poet. He's no longer with us. He passed away rather terribly, actually. Um, but he was talking about in it, the faces of God and evil, and I think he mentions they're they're on one coin, each side of the coin,
Yeah.
and you can get it at any moment.
Yeah.
And I know that this gentleman went through a terrible, horrific experience where his wife and his little girl were in an airplane, right? And the airplane unfortunately crashed,
Yeah.
and everybody in the airplane passed away, including his wife and his little girl. So he was waiting for them, and then all of a sudden he says, I believe he says, I learned that day the devil existed, but also God, you know, because through that suffering, that hellish kind of suffering, he emerged as this man that, if anybody knows about this gentleman, he's from Argentina,
Yeah.
and he's just a tremendous, tremendous.
He was a singer. He was a guitarist, composer.
composer, but
Yeah.
his songs are filled with lesson after lesson
Oh
after
yeah.
lesson after
Deep,
lesson,
deep,
deep,
deep.
deep
Yeah.
stuff. And I don't know that you can become that kind of a person without going through the suffering that he went through.
That's the thing.
I don't I
Yeah, you don't
I don't
wish it
want to
on
do it.
anybody. Yeah.
I don't want to become that kind of person because I have to go through this suffering. And then the story is, well, it's not up to you.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting about what he said about the coin.
yeah,
And I actually heard Peterson in an interview recently say that we all think that like that evil person is out there. And then he says you need to think of it as that evil person is inside you. And you're going to have to combat that evil person. He's not just out there. It's also within you. So figure out a way to make sure that you got that your stuff in order so that person doesn't come out kind of thing. It's pretty deep. Um Another thing that I thought was interesting here um was here's a quote from the book. What can what can be truly loved about a person is inseparable from their limitations. So what he's saying that like what we actually love, we love a person not in spite of their limitations, but actually because
because
of their limitations.
yeah, it's
And it's interesting because I've had conversations and with my wife about different things, and I say, there's beauty in imperfection. If something were perfect, then I think it would be dull. It would be boring, my opinion. And the fact that things are flawed and we are flawed, I think there's beauty behind that too. Um, you know, I thought, where have I encountered some of what Peterson talks about in this chapter? And when he was bringing up the point of like, because he opens up with pet a cat, and then he doesn't really talk about it, explaining what that means. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. He doesn't really get too much into it
no,
until very at the end.
yeah. I mean, he keeps.
But I thought, but he mentions like it could be any little thing that happens in your life that for a moment brings some sort of an opportunity for, let's say, joy. And I remember when your mom, grandma, passed away, and we were all very, very sad, and we were out of town when it happened, and we were in the hotel, all very, very sad. And my nephews, your grandkids, were very little at the time, but one, the oldest, picked up. He was very keen on like people's emotions, and he noticed that it was gloomy, it was dark in the room because we were all sad, mourning grandma's passing.
Mm-hmm.
But he noticed it, and I think, and he started to like try to play with us and pull us out of, and he was trying to play with you and getting your attention, and he was doing it to all of us. And he made us, because he's an innocent kid and didn't know what was going on, get out for a quick moment, for whether it was a 60 seconds or what, out of the dark place where we were, because we were mourning, our grandma that had passed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of relate to that, what he's talking about, that you know you in life, maybe life will bring you those moments uh to try and help you cope with something very, very serious that you're going through. I mean, I've gone through the loss of family members, right? And that's, but I haven't gone through maybe some things that other people have gone through extremely serious.
Oh.
But you figure out, how did you get through that? And maybe it was just moments like that that helped to pull you out for a moment out of the dark place, and then help you get through your day. I don't know, that was something I thought about, because Maybe that's like God, you know, like you see sometimes a family loses a family member, but a new baby is born in that
Right.
family around the same time sometimes. And it helps to get the attention and focus it on the new life that has come.
Yeah, you have no choice because that new life, that baby's going to cry, it's going to need to be taken care of. And so it's going to distract you
Yes.
for a moment of being in that somber state.
Yeah,
And that's a glimmer of light.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. And he says, because a lot of times we look at our fellow human being and they're going through a lot. I've seen some people go through some horrific health issues.
Yeah.
Okay. And I say to myself, wow, how can, where do they find the strength
Mm-hmm.
to do that? And maybe the strength comes within some of those moments of, distraction
Yeah.
because of X or Y reason. A child, a new baby is a very good example.
Yeah.
And, you think, if I were in their shoes, would I have the strength of character, the stamina to go through what they're going through? Because I look at them and I say, after all they've been beaten up on, look, they're still coming out, you know, somewhat,
Maybe positive,
yeah,
trying to
yeah. And
see
it's got to
things.
be, there's got,
Some
I
people
think,
go to faith, you know, they
where do you find your answers? The resilience of the strength of your soul,
yeah,
where do you find your answers to be able to go through the horrible things that life may throw at you? Because, my mom lived to be in her late 90s,
yeah,
and we
yeah.
knew
One
that
day.
one day something was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't want it to happen. You want to delay it, but you know it's coming because we all, you know,
Yeah,
have to go. And so, but it's still sad.
of course.
But I don't know how to compare that to, let's say, a young child
Of course.
pass.
No, no. I mean, there are different
I don't.
there are different types of suffering.
Yeah,
There's different degrees, I guess you can say. Like
because
you have different degree burns,
yeah,
you can have different degree
yeah.
suffering.
So for my mom, I always, you know,
Try to
reconcile
prepare
saying,
yourself.
yeah, I always told myself she lived a long and very fruitful and happy
Sure.
life. We
Yeah.
made her life as, you know, happy as possible, especially towards the end.
Yeah.
And so, because we knew that it was coming.
But
So, what do you do with a young baby, 4-year old, 3-year old? People are losing a child, and
how do you cope with it?
how do you cope with it?
You know, for a moment you took when you were talking about like these moments in life that maybe help us get through. You took me to that scene of Scent of a Woman where Al Pacino's driving he's blind and he's driving the Ferrari,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and he was in a depression, but Charlie, the guy who was taking care of him, right, says, "Why don't we go for a ride?" Yeah, let's go for a ride. And so they go for a ride, and for a moment, Al Pacino forgets about the depression that he's in, and he's just driving the car as fast
and
as possible, and he's giving the
he's giving Charlie
Charlie
a
a
heart
heart
attack.
attack. But you see it in his face, like he was
Yeah,
living life, and then after he gets stopped by the cop and they have to switch, uh he kind of comes back down. Remember,
yeah,
he like comes back down into the he was in a depression. um but that's a great movie.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it's interesting because I've heard the argument like with without without um evil you can't have good, without dark darkness you can't have light, and things like
yeah. I
that.
think this man says they're the two faces of a coin.
Yeah. You need to have both there, and that's what life is.
Wow.
And life, we encounter these things. So, finding ways to cope with it, I think is very important.
Yeah, and a lot of times you people say, oh, he's bearing a cross, he's carrying this cross, this other cross. And I've heard it said many times, when you're complaining about your lot, the what was thrown at you in this life, okay?
Hmm.
All you have to do is look behind you and see that there are a lot of people in worse shape than you are.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe you look in forward and you're seeing a lot of people in better positions or whatever. But in order to become practical on your position, you look back and you say, "Look, I'm glad I'm not there." It's like that example that comes out on the internet where the guy is walking and then a guy drives by with a bicycle, and he's thinking, "Oh, I wish I had a bicycle." And the guy that has the bicycle, a guy comes by in a car, and he thinks, "Oh, I wish I had the car." And it doesn't start with the guy walking; it starts with the guy in a wheelchair. And the guy in the wheelchair sees the guy walking and says, "Oh, I wish I had legs to walk." The other guy says, "Oh, I wish I had the bike." So you're always wishing something more than what you have,
Right.
okay? And I think the bottom line is, continue to strive to move forward, continue to learn something new every day, continue to try to better your life, but those little glimmer of hope moments
Yeah.
probably help you to carry your own weight in the cross you're bearing. It's deep. It's
Yeah.
because he's going through a lot. And you have a great point. You mentioned because Superman, the franchise almost went under.
Yeah,
They
that's
had to
what
reinvent it in the 80s because, Superman has so many powers that it was no fun reading it because you knew that he was going to win.
that's what he was saying, and then that Superman only exists because of kryptonite. That's basically what it comes down to. They had to create weak limitations for him.
Yeah,
All of a sudden, there's different kryptonites that weaken him. I don't
right.
know the Superman comic all that well, but I know that he has kryptonite. It could kill him.
Right, it weakens him and it may weaken him to a point where he passes away. But, you know, talk about being completely oblivious to this.
Hmm.
I lived through it because I used to read the Superman
Oh yeah,
comics, and I remember, oh, he's just gonna win because he could fly as fast as the speed of light. He could pick
yeah.
up planets. He could, and he started by being able to pick up cars and you know, running faster than a train. But then now all of a sudden he was running faster than light itself and picking up planets. And so there was nothing that could face him. He had no limitations.
Right.
And I remember thinking, he's going to win anyway. So I remember one time the new comics, I was just browsing through it and said, totally oblivious to what this Mr. Jordan Peterson
Is
is
bringing up.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah, that I actually lived through that. It became, like he says, somewhat boring. And then when Kryptonite was introduced, then there was a little bit more to the story. Oh, what happens if this? Oh, I'm going to read this one, yeah. So you're talking
He
about what
could die. There's the chance that he could die, and so he has to overcome.
he has to overcome.
Yeah,
There you
the
go.
challenges.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Without limitation, there's no being. The person that has everything and can do everything, and has no limitation. Therefore, there's no story. There's no story to Superman without it, and there's no story to us without our limitations. Um. Yeah. If he has nothing to strive against, he cannot be admirable. And sometimes I like to bring up, I say, hey, the adversity builds character,
Yes, you
right?
say that all the time.
Adversity builds character, and then the struggles make the man, the
Yeah.
struggles make the woman, because they do maybe scar us along the way, um, and we get hurt along the way, but when we overcome them, uh, we're, I think, a better person. Um, and then one of the things that he brought up was that another angle you can go is like he brought up the Columbine shooters again. Yeah, he kind of touched on some of the previous chapters, and he brought those guys up again, and he said um, that's one way that you can look at life, is that it's not worth living, and then that person takes their life. Or even worse is that, um, and he called it evil, to hate life and not only take your own but take others.
Yeah.
And so he's saying that those people chose that way, and he's trying to give another avenue of, because if you're going through so much suffering, that is what some people choose to do. And then he's trying to bring another perspective to it, is that you don't have to go that route. It's hard stuff to
Yeah, it
to
is.
digest, to be honest.
It is. It is hard to digest because,
Yeah.
and he hit me hard. I could really see myself in some of the stuff that he said. For example, when he was talking about his little son, and he's saying, "Whoa, he's he looks great. He's little. He's beautiful, but he's also very fragile. I mean, he could get hit by a truck, or somebody could push him, or but what could I do to make him better? Maybe I can make him out of titanium. That way, if a train hits him, nothing's gonna happen, or something like that. But then, okay, well then that takes away his beauty.
Right.
So he's saying
He wouldn't be
in
cute
he
anymore.
wouldn't be cute anymore,
Yeah.
you know. So he's saying in the effort of trying to safeguard his son
Mm-hmm.
by not making him fragile, he takes away the beauty and the specialness of his son. So we need to learn to realize that in the fragility of life
Is the
is
beauty.
is the beauty, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he's deep, man. I
he
mean,
said artificially fortifying his son would be the same as destroying him.
yeah,
Making him of titanium, that's no longer your son. You destroyed him.
right.
So that's that. Yeah, it's an interesting concept, because sometimes I hear you even say like, "Hey, I want to protect the kids and this and that, the grandkids, whatever." And I think it comes from a good place, but you have to, I guess, be careful with that, because he's saying, "What if I made him of titanium?" But could that be another metaphor, another analogy for actually trying to change who the kid is, let's say?
It's deep, man. And he gets into a lot of stuff. And then I just happened to be reading also another article completely unrelated to this about what's going on in the computer world and so forth. And life is changing.
Oh, with artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence and everything.
Yeah.
They're trying to create longevity. And
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing DNA manipulation and all kinds of stuff, apparently. And in fact, Google is involved with it, from what I understand. I hope I'm not misquoting anything. That's what the article had implied. And so, I mean, you know, the lady, even there was an interview where the lady says, "Well, life would be as we know it today," and he goes, "No, not exactly, because we're gonna be part robot, part human, and part. I mean,
Yeah.
and apparently that kind of stuff is happening now.
I
This is
believe
no
it.
longer. It sounds science, you know,
Sci-fi.
sci-fi kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's happening in not what the place in California where all the computer people are,
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
They have a program where they are investing billions of dollars to try to create longevity in life. And by longevity, they're messing around with the DNA and I
Yeah, now
mean,
you're getting into
All kinds
Are
of
you
stuff.
playing God, right?
Yeah.
Um, the
So
bi-
if you look at that and then you go back to Peterson, he's keeping it simple by saying fragility in life is what makes you
yeah,
special
yeah,
and cute and you and
unique, and
unique and yeah.
it's what makes us. And if you take that away, you're changing that. You're destroying us. Um,
It's deep. I mean, this thing, um,
it is. This one was. They all the not all of them.
not
Each
all of
chapter
them.
progressively got deeper, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
because stand up straight with your shoulders back. That was rule one. That's I can handle that. And uh, treat yourself like you're someone responsible for helping. Okay, I can handle that. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, but not to someone else who is today. Not to someone who, not to who someone else is today. I can handle that. You're talking about, okay,
Rule 5. Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them.
yeah,
Rule 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
I can understand that.
Okay.
Okay,
Rule 7. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient.
wonderful.
Rule 8. Tell the truth or at least don't lie.
See, he's getting a little bit more like
Yeah.
because we're not tell the truth, but at least don't lie. Well, what's the difference?
Well,
And then he goes on to explain.
in a recent interview, I saw Peterson said that there's lying by commission or omission, and that potentially lying by omission is even worse than by commission. When you know something and you don't say it. Um, Rule 9, assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't.
That's cool.
Rule 10, be precise in your speech. Rule 11, do not bother children when they are skateboarding. And then Rule 12, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Overall, this has been, I've learned a lot with this book. One of the big takeaways from the book, but this chapter is not to lose hope. And you say that all the time. We can't lose hope. No matter what we're going through, people are complaining, about things going on, with the economy, everything, what life, maybe health issues, everything, but you can't lose hope because then you're kind of just putting up the flag and
Yeah,
the white flag and surrendering.
right. And it's over.
It's over at that point.
It's over at that point. And you know what? When you're in a lot of pain, tremendous pain, like he was describing his daughter,
Mm,
that he knew that she was at the end of the wick, right? At the end of the, and he was there to try to help her, okay? And carry her through this dark place, right? Um, some people will give in. I've been in a couple of instances in my life been preview to people that were in the hospital and they were just ready to go and they were holding on by a thread. And that thread was a son that was coming from another state
mm.
or a daughter that was coming from another state
Maybe something they wanted to say to them or
or just see
resolve
them.
or just see them before. Yeah,
And I've seen where when the daughter comes into the room and they make eye contact, because sometimes they can't because the person might be in a coma, but they make eye contact and okay,
they're ready.
and they're ready and they just let go. And there's something to be said about that, man, because they just let go and they go in peace
Yeah, the
and
power of the mind that they're able to
grasp.
hold on and
Yeah,
then let go and say I'm ready.
yeah.
Like we were talking about this lady that was the mother or related to a friend of the family, and that she had a last dinner. She just said, "Hey, this is gonna be the last dinner." She made all the dishes that everybody loved to eat, and they had a wonderful. She dressed up. They had a wonderful evening, and then after that, she let everybody know that she was ready to go. It's like she made the conscious decision that she was ready. That's like, oof, that's um
It's tremendous.
yeah.
I worked for a guy many, many years ago. His first name was Harold. He looked fine. He was older. You know, he must have been in his 60s. And he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Hey, you have terminal pancreatic cancer and spread to your liver. So you don't have much to go, but we can give you chemotherapy, this and that, and whatever." And he said, "Nope, I don't want any of it." He came back and had a meeting, from what I understand, with the kids, because I worked for him, and with his family. And he said, "Listen, I've had a wonderful life. I'm still within my senses, and I choose to go before I get too much into pain and this and that." And so this is like 30 years ago, Mike, and he stopped eating.
Oh wow.
He made the decision to stop eating, and he stopped eating, and he was gone quick. I don't know, 10 days. I wasn't privy to a lot of the details because, you know, I was an employee, and but we were close. He liked me, and I liked him. He was a man of tremendous wisdom, and he just stopped eating, and he was gone quick. So, you know,
Wow.
it's as you're going through difficult things in life, try to keep your hope and try to nibble on those priceless moments that maybe bring a little bit of light to
Yeah.
your life,
Yeah.
and cling on to that and see if you can climb out. That's what I would say. Climb out, you know?
Yeah.
And who am I? I'm nobody. And I don't know that I would have the strength to do it. But I think that's what this is talking about,
Yeah.
you know?
I
Tough
think that's a
book.
I think that's a great way to wrap this up, and uh, I strongly suggest anyone listening, if they haven't read the book, to read it. I learned a lot, and I'm excited for our next series. You know, we've now done the 48 laws of power. We went through each law. Now the 12 rules of life, and I'm excited to see what we do next.
Me too.
That's what we're going to talk about today.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.